Everyone, it's Lisa from IDreaminSoap. Welcome to my channel and thanks for popping by. I'm so excited about today's soap. I've made this little soap which on the face of it looks like a lovely pretty summer tree done as an embed throughout the soap. However, it's a transforming soap, and as you use the soap it's going to change from a summer tree into an autumn tree, and then as you get through to the centre we're going to have a nice winter tree scene. I hope you enjoy this video. If you do, it would be great if you left me a thumbs up, maybe put a comment in the comments box below. If you'd like to see what I'm coming up with in the future, why not subscribe to my channel? Come on, let's go make some soap. I'm going to start off my soap by making lots and lots of leaves for my trees with some soap dough. Now this is just some soap dough I've had stored away, leftover bits and pieces from other projects, but you could make some up fresh if you wanted to. I've made myself an extruder disc. You can just cut this out of some plastic so that I've got a couple of leaf shapes on it, and I'm going to use that to extrude my soap dough. I'll put a link to the extruder that I used down in the description box. Now, because I want my tree to go through all of the seasons, I'm going to do obviously some autumnal colours, which is what I've got here, but I'm also going to do some leaves in a couple of shades of green as well, for sort of like the spring-summer phase. And as I extrude each of my sort of rows of leaves, I will then straighten them out just so that as they start to dry out, they're not going to be all bendy and wrinkly. And then when I think I've got enough of each colour, I'm just going to leave them out for a little while just to stiffen up a bit. And now for my trees, I'm actually going to do 5 layers of tree, because I want to have my summer tree as the outside on both the top and the bottom, and then my autumn as the next layer in on the top and the bottom, and then I'm going to have winter in the middle. I am going to make my winter tree right in the middle twice as thick as the others. So I'm just using these little plastic guides so that I can roll out a consistent thickness for all of my trees. And then I've made myself some little tree-shaped cutters and a little pusher to push the soap dough out with. Now if you're doing this type of thing, you can use any type of cookie cutter that you can buy. They're going to be absolutely fine. Just pick a design that you like and go for it. So I made 45 trees in total for my 9 trees per layer for my 5 layers. And then I've just wrapped them up in some film, and I'm just going to leave these to sit, but I don't want them to dry out because I do want them to bond together nicely. And then because I want those individual bars, I've just put a template underneath my silicone liner so I can see through that to where my bars will be. So I'm going to start off with the first of those outside layers, making my spring-summer tree. And I'm going to make some grass first of all, so I'm going to be using lime and chartreuse sparkle, both from You Make It Up. I'm going to be piping my grass into the mould, so I'm just making up a very small amount of batter here. I'm just going to bring it to a decent trace because I want it quite thick, and then I'm going to add my fragrance oil. The fragrance oil I'm using is Cherry Blossom from Gracefruit in the UK. I've calculated the amount of fragrance I need for this little portion based on my total oil weight, not the total amount of batter. And then I'm going to take that batter and split it between my 2 colours that I've pre-dispersed in some olive oil, and then just blend that up to get to a decent trace, and then just let it sit until it's thick enough to pipe. And then I'll alternate my colours as I put them into the piping bag. So as I pipe them out, I get different colours coming through in the grass. And then as I'm about to start piping, I'm just dropped in one of those little templates of a tree, just so I can make sure I get the grass at some sort of decent scale compared to the tree. And as I build up my piping, I'm going to try and make my grass about 10mm thick, so that I can have it the depth of 2 trees before I then need to go into my winter scene. And then I'll put in the first layer of trees, making sure that I place them as well as I can in the middle of each bar, and that they're all facing around the same way. Now to choose the blue colour I want for my sky, I make colour swatches for all of my micas that I have, but I also keep swatches of any blends that I make. So I've mucked around with sort of sky colours in the past, so I'm just using those to try and pick the colour that will best sort of highlight the trees and the leaves that I've got going on in here. And once I've made my choice, I can just look, I keep a little number on the back of each swatch, and I can look back to my notes, and that will tell me the proportions of the colourants that I used to make that colour. So for my pick of the day blue, I actually used equal proportions of shimmer blue from Mica Mama and titanium dioxide. Now I'm actually going to be pouring my sky in 15 separate pours. And firstly, I'd like the sky colour to be a consistent colour through each of the bars, and also secondly, I don't want to be mixing up this mixture of blue every single time I do a separate pour. So therefore I'm going to add the colourants directly to the oil and blend it into the oil first. And then as I go to make my separate little batches, I'll use my coloured oil to mix in with my lye solution. So I'm just going to weigh this mixture again, and that's because I've added things with the colourants to the oils, so therefore it will weigh slightly more, and I'll want to factor that into my calculations when I calculate how much lye to put into each individual batch. So I've calculated the amount of oils and lye I need for my first little section, so I'm just going to bring that up to a light trace, add in my fragrance oil, Now I've deliberately gone for a very light trace here as I start my pour, and that's so that as I put my leaves in, the batter will start to thicken up, and it's going to take a little while to get those leaves in, and I need to make sure that that batter hasn't got really thick by the time I'm putting in the last leaves. Because if you try and press an embed into a batter that's reasonably thick, you're going to end up with all sorts of air gaps and pockets and things. Now, do you remember all those leaves that I extruded? Well, I've now chopped them all up into roughly 5mm pieces, so they're ready to pop in around my trees. So here we go with row 1, layer 1, putting every individual leaf in with a set of tweezers. Now clearly, if you want to do some sort of soap like this, maybe choose a less intricate design that won't take you 5 hours of putting pieces of soap into a soap mould. So with the magic of editing, just jumped up to the top row of that first layer and just finishing off the last few trees. So summer's done now and moving on to autumn, so I'm just taking my second row of trees and putting them carefully on top of the first row. And then I'm just going to repeat the process. For each of those little rows, I'm going to pour in some very fluid blue sky batter and then start placing all of my autumn leaves. Time for winter, so let's make some snow. So just mixing up some white soap batter with titanium dioxide. I'm going to add in my winter trees. Now these are the trees that are actually twice the thickness of the other trees, so that we have a decent amount left in the middle of the soap by the time it changes to winter. And then before I start piping on any snow, I'm just going to scrape back any of that grass that is sticking up into the winter layer so that we can get a nice clean snowy scene. I then made up another very small batch of fluid white soap batter because I need to drizzle this between the branches to make the snow sitting on top of the trees. I spent a little bit of time just making sure that the white had gone right in between all of the branches, and then I'm just going to start piping the snowy ground. And there's winter done. Woohoo! No leaves to put in. So then I'm just going to flood the remaining bits of that layer with the blue soap batter, so I've just got a nice firm layer so I can start going back through autumn and summer again. So I've then just gone through the entire process again, but this time in reverse. So adding some more trees and some grass. I'm going to add my autumn layer first and then finish off with my summer layer on the top. And then to finish off, I'm just going to flood that final layer in between all of those leaves just to make sure I've closed up any gaps and I've got a nice smooth surface. So I insulated and sea-popped my soap as normal, and then I left it in the mould for about 36 hours and then I unmoulded it. Now this cutting is not going to be the most exciting thing in the world, because although I'm going to cut the bars up, until I actually plane them we're not going to see the pattern. So I'm just going to divide my slab into 3, and then I'll take those pieces and chop each of those into 3 bits to end up with my 9 bars. And then I left them for another day just to make sure they were firm enough to plane. Now, I had all sorts of problems with my camera here. I'm sure I kept pressing record and every time I looked up there was a black screen. So as you'll see, I've already planed one side of these soaps and I'm just going through and planing the other now. So I'm going to finish the bars off by carefully beveling the edges. Now I'm only going to do one of these on the video because it's actually quite a long process, and if I sped all 9 bars up so they fitted, it would actually make it look really hurried and quite careless. So just 1 bar of beveling. And then here's a look at how the bar will look as you go through and use up the soap, and then some final pictures of the soap. I really hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, it would be great if you left me a thumbs up and maybe a comment in the comments section below. If you've got any questions and queries, please leave those. I'm really good at getting back to people. If you'd like to see what I'm making in the future, why not subscribe to my channel? Thanks for watching everyone, and happy soaping!